Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today for this talk on diversifying your income, the latest in the Authors Guild Foundation series, Money Matters, which is also kind of converging with our other current series, Business Boot Camps for Writers. This has been great. We're very thankful for our host, Aaron Lowry, doing a great job with this series and the wonderful panelists we have on board. We're always interested in topics that help you with the business side of writing, because you can't keep writing great stuff if you're too worried about the financial components of things. Before we begin, I want to say thank you to all our donors. The Authors Guild Foundation is a charitable arm of the Authors Guild, and we're really happy to be able to present these webinars for free to anyone who's interested, whether or not you're a member of the Authors Guild. We welcome you to check out authorsguild.org to learn more about what we do, or just look at our YouTube channel to see more events in this series and other educational events that we've done. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Erin Lowry, our host for the series. She's the author of the 3-part Broke Millennial series. She's been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CBS Sunday Morning, all kinds of media. She's great at these webinars, and I'm happy to turn it over to you, Erin. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Hi, everyone. I've already seen a few questions about recordings, and yes, there will be a recording available. So if you have to jump for any reason, I've already seen a few like, oh, we have a meeting. So don't worry, you will be able to catch this full recording afterwards. And I am really excited about today's panel because who doesn't want to talk about how to diversify your income? I know for me, as a freelancer, it's something that's incredibly important. And we have a wonderful group of panelists here with us today. So I'm going to start with some quick intros so we can just get right into all of this content. So first we have Lisa Marie Basile, who is a full-time freelance writer, editor, and author based in New York City. She has written for the New York Times, Best American Experimental Writing, Self, Narratively, Healthline, and more. She is the author of 3 books of nonfiction, as well as a few books of poetry, notably one being translated into French, as we just heard. And she edits Luna Luna magazine. She received an MFA from the New School in New York City. Yaneli Espinal was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and is one of the first in her family to graduate college. After completing Teach for America, Yaneli paired her love for teaching with her passion for financial literacy, creating a unique YouTube channel for people to engage with topics like budgeting, managing credit, saving, and investing for retirement, and more. Miss Be Helpful is her name, by the way. It's not in your bio, but I'm going to plug it for you. Yaneli serves as the Director of Educational Outreach at NextGen Personal Finance and is a member of CNBC's Financial Wellness Advisory Council. And we have Tim Herrera, who is the founder of Freelancing with Tim, a suite of educational resources designed to help journalists navigate the industry. He previously worked at the New York Times for 6 years, where he helped launch and then edited Smarter Living before he worked as a reporter and a social producer for the Washington Post. He graduated from NYU with degrees in journalism and anthropology, and he lives in Manhattan with his platonic life partner and 2 cats, Strudel and Streets. So everyone, I am really thrilled to have you today. And I want to start with what is some of the oddest, we're going to call it side hustle, side gig, side job, diversifying income opportunity that you have ever taken. So Yaneli, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I started my career as a classroom teacher. As you mentioned in my bio, I did Teach for America. And when I was wrapping up my stint at TFA, I was like, really just stressed about money, and I was trying to pay off all this credit card debt. And so I just went on like Indeed and Idealist and all these websites, and I just started typing, anything that had the word teacher or educator, because that's what my job was. And weirdly enough, there was a job that was like on-screen teacher. So I was like, okay, like I submitted an application. I didn't think I would get it. And the next day they called me and said, hey, do you want to come into Manhattan and be the on-screen teacher for all these like random alternative classes that students who didn't like finish high school the traditional pathway, they could go online and take these random like alternative course loads, and I would be their on-screen teacher and like welcome them and teach them random subjects. And that paid me really well, and it was so fun. And a few years later, students would like point at me on the subway and like, that was my online teacher, and like, and I'd be like, oh hey. So it was great money, and it was actually really fun.
So you got famous from your first gig. That's great. Lisa, how about you?
So 2 most, I guess, notable weirder side hustles include reading private poetry readings at like literary cabarets. So taking a stranger into a dark corner and reading them poetry for money, which exists. And another one that I thought was very weird and paid very well was writing names of perfumes and accompanying poetic copy for those perfumes. So I spent about a year working with Valentino to come up with like really poetic names for a line of poetry. And I never thought I would find myself in that place, but it paid well and it was really fun.
So cool.
Okay, Tim, before we go to you, I just have to ask, how did you find those gigs, Lisa? Like, I think that that's always like the very interesting part of this too.
It is interesting. So the literary cabaret was through my grad school professor who was doing it at the time. I was hugely obsessed with her and her writing. And so I just sort of like stalked her out and went to this event, became friends with her, became friends with the people, and got involved. And then Valentino and other perfume writing, there was like a person on Facebook who posted about it. And it was like a sort of word of mouth type thing. I know this person, that person knows this person, apply here. And I applied, I didn't hear back for months, and then it came to fruition. So sort of being in the world, I guess, is my answer. It wasn't like, I usually used Craigslist for a lot of weirder side gigs, but this was all word of mouth.
Wow, great. And Tim, what's your weirdest side gig you've ever had?
So I have kind of a double part answer here. So the weirdest side gig is weird because it's something that I never thought I would do, because for years I was under the impression that it was like a fake job that actually means nothing at all. But I'm doing a bunch of consulting, which started as like this weird thing. I'm like, fuck it, like why not? I'll give it a shot, even though I totally thought it was a scam position. And then I got into it and I was like, wait a minute, this is actually really fun work. It's really impactful work. And this weird little thing that I just took on kind of a whim has turned into one of my primary sources of income. And it's something I never ever thought I would ever do, because I thought it was just a fake industry, which it kind of is, but it's still like an amazing job. And like when you find a role doing it that has real impact, it's unbelievably rewarding. So I'm very thankful that I accidentally stumbled into it.
Well, kind of the same follow-up that I gave to Lisa. You say accidentally stumbled in. And how did your first consulting gig come to you, that it was sort of serendipitous, if you will?
Yeah, it totally was. So I left my job over the summer, and then this fall finally kind of like started tweeting that I had left. And a lot of this is kind of right place, right time. But there were a couple of newsrooms who were aware of Freelancing with Tim, which I started last spring during the pandemic. And they had literally just DM'd me on Twitter to say, hey, saw you at the Times, been a fan of Freelancing with Tim for a long time, wondering if you do any newsroom consulting. And I hadn't really thought about doing that, but then I was like, I could do that. Why not? And one thing led to the next. And like I said, it turned into one of my primary sources of income.
That's amazing. So Lisa, you've authored nonfiction and poetry books, and you freelance for both lifestyle and health sites. So multitude of different industries and genres. And how do you suggest authors market themselves to kind of do that crossover and find opportunities between genres? And I'm just going to give a for instance. This was actually specific to a question that came in. Like, if you're a children's author, can you find opportunities in a completely different genre or industry altogether?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's something that I should make clear right off the bat. I believe that everyone can pivot and transition between genres. I don't necessarily think genre is something that we should all be hyper concerned about. A lot of people are kind of into the idea of breaking down genres. So I think as long as you kind of find the center of your interests, you can kind of pivot from there. So I'll use myself for example. I write a lot of health copy and content for different health magazines, but I also write nonfiction books about secular, ritualized living. So rituals and practice you can use to make your life better. So on one hand, we have this sort of like woo-woo topic. On the other, I write medical copy that is very evidence-based and scientific. So people might say, how are these related? You also are a poet. I don't understand what this is. I think at the center of it all is creativity. It is caring for the body and the mind, and it is service to others through art, through science, through life practices. So I try to think of it as there's one sort of hub for who I am as an artist, and these are all the arms. And so I think no matter if you write YA or you are trying to get into science fiction or you're trying to get into medical writing, there is something about you and what drives you as an artist, as a writer, as a creator, that you can jump off from that point and bring it into anything that you do. And I say, as long as you're doing it with integrity, you are doing your very best, and you are open about your multitudes and your many layers, I think people will see and appreciate that.
I do kind of want to follow up about that. And, as a fellow personal finance writer like myself, I think you can come in on this. We got a question that came in, Lisa, while you were talking, that brought up that, especially in copywriting, sometimes the prevailing belief is that niching and having a very particular hyper-specialized niche can be better. And what are thoughts on that? So I myself am a personal finance writer. That's where I tend to focus. But even within that, there are so many different facets of money, and that I've branched out where I'm not, I don't just talk about credit scores. I don't just talk about budgets. It's a much more holistic topic. And kind of like Tim, I have now fallen backwards into consulting about how companies can appeal to millennials and Gen Z to get them to engage better with their benefits, even though that has really nothing to do with the personal finance work that I originally sought to do. But to your point, Lisa, is kind of an arm off of the, our initial branch, if you will. So, Yaneli, for you as well, have you felt that like niching to a particular topic was helpful or almost allowed for more opportunity to grow?
Yeah. Okay, so for that, I have an analogy that I'll get to. But actually, to Lisa's point, I just wanted to add, I recently was at a conference that was talking about early elementary, since you mentioned children's books. And I used to be a classroom teacher for third grade. And all the language that I've ever heard and that I used when I was a teacher, referencing like conversations about growing up in careers and work and what you want to be with kids, uses that what do you want to be when you grow up? And instead of focusing on the be, we need to focus on what Lisa talked about, which is the doing. Instead of asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which makes it feel like you have to pick a genre, pick a job, and like that's what you do and it's your identity. That's what you are. You're going to be that. Like we need to change the language and shift the conversation to what are the things that you want to do with your time that you have. Maybe that includes tennis. Maybe that includes work. Maybe that includes, being a good aunt and what all the things, right? So that we can envision our lives holistically and not like my identity is wrapped around my career, which is one genre and one thing, and it's so limiting. So that's just one thing I wanted to add there. And I loved what you said, Lisa. So your question, Erin, which I love, I think that is like the onion, the classic onion analogy, right? Every time you go online and read about niche marketing, you picture that onion, and that very first layer at the top is the most general possible layer. It's like, I want to help everybody who needs financial empowerment. Like, okay, but that's a lot of people. Like, let's get the next layer of the onion. Okay, I want them to be, women. Okay, great. So women who need financial empowerment. Let's get to the next layer. I want it to be Gen Z or millennial women. Okay, great. Women between the ages of 18 to 35 who need financial empowerment or want financial empowerment. We're getting closer and closer to that, core of the onion where you have that most niche level of your audience. But that doesn't limit you. What it does is allow you to work in any of the layers of the onion. Oh, you have a women's conference? Guess what? I'm targeting women. It doesn't matter that they're between 18 and 35 and that they have to look for financial. No, women are one of my layers. Oh, you have a youth conference for 18 to 30? Oh, guess what? I can speak because that's part of my niche. I'm focusing on that age group. Oh, you have a financial literacy awareness empowerment event. Great, I speak about financial literacy. Like now I can do women's conferences, financial conferences, youth conferences. I can do so much because every layer of the onion that makes my niche stronger also gives me the flexibility to do things that may not be just in my specific niche.
I love that. That's a great reframe. Now, Tim, for those who are really focusing on writing a book, and as many of us have probably experienced, advances are shifting. Used to be more traditionally 3 installments, and now it's being split more into 4 or 5 and being stretched out. So what are some of your suggestions about creating diverse income streams as you're also working on a big project like a book?
Yeah, so the advance for my book was paid out, it is being paid out in 4 different instances, payments. And so, since I left my full-time job, this is something I've thought a lot about. And my thinking on it has really evolved very rapidly. You know, I think as, you know, folks who are coming from journalistic backgrounds or from news writing, you know, we have this weird kind of purity test that truly only exists in our mind, but we think like, oh, what I do is important. I write the news. And, you know, this is such a silly way of thinking because the only person who really cares about this purity test is yourself. And I think shifting your thinking away from only doing one thing because you think that's the right career path into like, well, what seems interesting to me and what are things that I can make money off my existing skill sets. And so for me, the deeper that I'm getting into the world of freelancing and all the things that are adjacent to that, I'm realizing what I thought the work that I would be doing, which is journalistic writing and news writing, one is by orders of magnitude the least lucrative thing I'm doing, but also there's a whole universe of interesting work out there that you can do in terms of writing or project management or project work or whatever it may be. There's probably a way to make money off something that you're just good at and interesting at. And so currently I'm writing something about just our self-perception, and the work that we take on as freelancers is a reflection of that self-perception. And, you know, the truth is I could probably count on one hand the number of freelancers I know who make their entire income just from journalistic writing and news writing. And, you know, again, for me, it feels like this Pandora's box that once you realize there is so much more money in different types of freelancing, whether that's writing or project work, whatever it may be, for me, I'm sort of wrestling this question of, you know, I've been doing journalism for 11 or 12 years, and now I'm like, now I am not tied to a single newsroom or a single type of coverage. This whole world has opened up. And I think a mistake that I see a lot among writers and freelancers is just this self-limitation based on our self-perception that I think once you break out of, again, this whole world opens up of unbelievably lucrative things that you could be doing that you maybe hadn't considered doing. You know, my consulting work is a good example of that. This is something I would never have called myself a consultant before, but now I absolutely would say I do consulting work. And that turns out to be like, again, something I'm doing that is orders of magnitude more lucrative than any type of journalistic or news writing I could possibly do.
Oh, that tees us up so perfectly for a big question that came in. And iterations of this question have come in a few times. And Lisa, I'm going to position this to you first, but how can I take on these kind of projects or a side project and not diminish my reputation as a quote unquote serious writer?
That's a great question. I feel like this comes up a lot. I see it a lot in conversations on social media. And I worried about it too. I mean, so I have a background in creative writing. So this concept that I am a literary writer, I do creative nonfiction, I'm a poet, therefore I do some sort of very cerebral high art, you know? And if I write something that isn't that, I was worried, am I going to be taken seriously if I do write a book of rituals and practices that may or may not be a little on the, you know, magical side? Is this going to diminish my reputation as a literary person? Or like I teach a monthly workshop series with a friend that is based on your astrological birth chart and how you can use it as a writing tool. So these are things that first of all, they've only enriched my life. They've connected me with so many people. And I think it is unwise to assume that people aren't interested in your many facets and that people aren't able to connect the dots between what might be a fun side project, what is sort of high art, what is your important work. I think people more and more today, especially because of social media, are interested in layers, the multitudinous self, the many ways that we can express ourselves in our art and our vision and who we are as writers and creators. So if anything, I don't think it's diminished my work at all. And I certainly have never thought that about anyone else. In fact, I've only ever seen it as an opportunity to build on what I've done well, to kind of shape it into new ways, to look at my work through different portals, and to, like, you know, Yaneli said, expand on what I can speak to and what I can do, and just kind of create many more pots for me to put my hands in. And they all, you know, everything that we do as writers speaks to itself in some way. Nothing is totally disconnected. Your voice is always there. Your integrity is always there. The drive that you have as a writer is always in there, even if it takes different shapes.
Well, and tagging onto that, Yaneli, I know that you've done brand partnership type work before, and how do you recommend authors kind of cultivate those type of relationships, or even consider those kind of relationships, especially if we're tying into the potential concern about continuing to be taken seriously?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because any brand partnerships that I've done, whether it's video work or whether it's writing, have all come to me because of my YouTube channel and my videos that I've posted, which interestingly enough is kind of like my reputation online is just this, you know, base of knowledge around a specific topic. But the other thing that I was able to showcase with that, you know, portfolio of videos on my YouTube channel is, you know, my personality, all of the aspects of who I am, how I speak, you know, and being able to show all of the facets of me. So sometimes I'm very professional. I'm teaching something, I'm in teacher mode and it's the serious time. And then there's times where I'm talking like story time, like I'm telling you, and I'm just really talking like how I talk when I'm with my brothers and sisters and we're drinking wine and we're just cracking up and just not being so formal and stuffy. And because they see the versatility that I have, it's actually led to so many different types of gigs and, you know, very serious jobs I've done with like, you know, TurboTax and Intuit, and, you know, more silly jobs that I've done with like, you know, major YouTube channels that are more, you know, cartoonish or like animated series or, you know, fun stuff. And I think that for me, that means that I'm being taken seriously. So that I care more about than my serious reputation. But I don't care so much about my serious reputation. I want to be taken seriously. And I think I have a good reputation, a strong reputation, and I'm being taken seriously. And that matters more to me than this idea of a serious writer or a serious speaker or a serious professional. And I think that there's room for us to have, you know, to be multifaceted and to do all the things. But when you do switch over, they just have to be done very well. So when you're going to show your personality, you better have a really great quirky personality, because if you are kind of bland, then maybe you focus on just the professional bland standard format, because that's what you do really well. You don't really shine in the other, you know, areas. So I think if we're going to be multifaceted, show all the facets are going to be taken seriously and that are going to show your versatility really well, because that's, for me, that's actually led to a lot of success without me having to exert a ton of energy, because it comes naturally to me.
So we've talked thus far about consulting, brand partnerships, speaking opportunities, copywriting, writing articles, freelance writing. So we've already talked about a broad spectrum of diversifying your income opportunities, but we haven't yet talked about pricing. So let's get into that a little bit with any guidance that you can offer on how do you set your rates when it comes to a project. So Tim, I'm going to start with you.
Great. Super quick. I just want to add a tiny little button to the last question. You know, the truth is nobody is following your career except for you. It only, and I tell you from firsthand absolute experience, I was a commissioning editor at the New York Times for 6 years. Unless there's a conflict of interest and it pertains to the story that you've pitched, I don't care what you do. Literally nobody cares about your career except you. And we have this perception, oh, there's like a spotlight on me all the time. You know, I'm going to get scrutinized for taking on X project or Y assignment. No, that is not true. No one cares. I promise you that, as someone who assigns stories. So in terms of money, it's such a nutty topic because it really varies so much, even within the same category. So let's talk about freelance writing, journalistic freelance writing, for example. You know, there are certain publications that top out at 25 cents a word. On the other hand, when I was commissioning at the Times, I started writers out at $1 a word. And everything in between. And so it's really difficult to give broad advice about setting rates. So really the more important thing to think about, and I think the kind of smarter way to look at it, is how do I generate the most amount of income doing the least amount of work? And so what that calculus is going to be for you is entirely dependent on what type of work you want to do, how much you want to work, what types of work you're interested in. So, you know, I have, you know, freelance friends who have, let's say they're doing news writing. They have a floor, and below that floor, they simply won't take the assignment. I similarly have that. I won't take an assignment for less than $1 a word. Generally speaking, if I'm doing work for a large newsroom, I won't take on a project for less than 1,500, give or take, depending on how much work is involved. And so anything below that, I just don't take. What that floor is going to change by person and by assignment. But there's a really good shorthand when you're thinking about taking on an assignment and thinking through the rates. And I first heard about this from my friends who run the Writers Co-op, which is an amazing freelance network. It's a podcast. So the way that they look at it when they're assessing whether they want to take on a new assignment, they think of 3 things, and the assignment should satisfy 2 of those. And those 3 things are pay, prestige, and passion. So if you're debating, do you want to take on this assignment, whatever it may be, think through like, does this pay me enough, and is it prestigious enough that it doesn't have to be something I actually like really am passionate about? On the other hand, I can use myself for an example. Earlier this fall, I took on an assignment for The Atlantic. It's a 1,200 word reported feature, and they're paying me a flat rate of 600, which balances out to around 50 cents a word. That's 50% of my floor rate. But it's The Atlantic, so the prestige is there, and the passion's there because it's a topic that I really care about and that I really want to write about. So for that, I'm willing to go beneath my floor because it satisfies the other things. But it's really, I feel like setting rates is something that you have to talk with other people about, specifically among certain publications. Like, go to your freelance friends and say like, hey, I saw you wrote for the Washington Post last year. What did they pay you? Generally, freelancers are very open about stuff like that. But it's also something that you figure out over the course of your career, and that changes over the course of your career. My floor is $1 a word, but 5 years ago when I did freelance work, it was nowhere near $1 a word. So it changes over the course of your career, and the calculus is always in flux.
I'm going to add one factor. I love those 3. And I'm also going to add networking as a potential addition to that. If it's an opportunity where you think that you are going to get in a room and be able to showcase your work, particularly speaking engagements. I've taken speaking gigs every so often for free, rarely, but every so often for free. But it got me into a room where I knew if I performed well, that was probably going to lead to other paying opportunities. Mm-hmm. Or it's not quite at your rate, but again, you know that you're going to get into a room in front of people that could lead to more opportunities. That is also another angle to think on it in terms of the calculus that you're running, which I love having like a floor. That's such a good piece of advice. Lisa,
that's an excellent thought, and I'm totally going to steal that every time I talk about this. That is so good.
Lisa, how about you?
I definitely use the pay, prestige, passion mindset when I go into accepting any sort of assignment now or event or something like that. In the beginning, I started freelancing 10 years ago. I always had a job while I was freelancing up until about 4 years ago. And so having a 9-to-5 meant I had a cushion. It was fine. I could kind of really play with the passion part of it, which was just develop clips at pretty much any rate that I was being offered and build my portfolio that way. Over the years, I've had to be more selective because I left my full-time job in 2017 for chronic health purposes because I wanted to take better care of my body and my mind. And so I had to build a series of anchor clients before I left my job, which I highly advise anyone do if you are thinking about making that transition. Anchor clients are your bread and butter, basically. So with those anchor clients, I made sure that they were paying me a living wage. Basically, I calculated all my expenses and what ideally I would like to be paid for the assignments that I'm doing every month, compared it to people in my area and my industry, and kind of modulated it from there. And like Tim says, it changes all the time. It changes every year. So yeah, in the beginning of my career, I was really getting paid $15, $20 an article sometimes, writing little things for ehow.com, 300 words, 400 words. Very, very hard to live on. At this point, most of my assignments are between $500, $600, and $1,200 an assignment. So I'm able to pick out, how much I want to work. I'm also able to go with clients that I just really believe in and want to work for, even if it's not prestigious, but I love the work. I love writing about X, Y, or Z. I love the company. I love how they create editorial. Or I'll go for just straight up passion and take a little bit less, because as a writer, I get very bored and I lose motivation if I'm just working on the high pay, boring assignments all the time. So I need to kind of balance out the love and the beauty and the creativity and the passion with the like, okay, this is going to pay all of my bills. And that's something I would also really recommend, is creating a dynamic freelance experience for yourself so that you don't burn out and become resentful and feel like every day is the exact same. So it's really depending on your financial needs, create a little room for yourself to play around and have fun and bring joy to your freelance experience, because it can get very stuffy and very isolating quickly.
Oh,
Yes.
so great. Finale.
I love those comments. I think two of the things that will perfectly lead me to my comments are, it depends on like your financial need, and also leave some wiggle room, right? So when I was really, struggling, a $50 gig was a big deal for me. And so I was like, yeah, somebody give me $50 to show up for an hour. Woo, I will take it. Yes, I will be there. And that worked for me at that time. I was just starting out and I had a lot of credit card debt, and an hour of my time for $50 was a great deal. At the same time, as I've, earned more money and learned more about finances and paid off my debt and started to really build more of a reputation, I realized that when I file my taxes, I'm giving 25, 26, 27% of that away to taxes. So if I'm charging 50, or if I'm accepting $50 in an hour, I have to consider that, a quarter that's not going to be something I'm going to keep. And so what I'm actually accepting is more like $35, $30, like really do the math a little bit. And so when you're setting your rates, think about that. Like, for me, when I really started thinking about the first time I had to actually have a rate to send to somebody, I was like, I don't have a rate. They asked me for my rate. What's my rate? I don't know. And so I was like, okay, what is the least amount of money that I want to make in 1 hour? The fact that I have to plan for this, prepare what I'm going to say, or just be ready, do a tech run, maybe if it's a speaking gig, or if it's writing all the time that I'm going to have to think about my ideas and edit and proofread and all the things. So for me, it's like, let's say that's $350, right? What amount would I have to make so that after taxes, I keep $350. So if I do a little bit of rough math, 25, 28%, that's going to be somewhere around $500. If I want to come home with $350, $360 after taxes, I got to make sure I'm charging $500 an hour, right? So if you say out loud, I want to make $350 an hour, then don't charge $350 an hour, because that doesn't make sense financially. So for me, that was really hard at first, because I just didn't understand all the numbers and all the, I had never gotten a 1099 until I got my first contracting gig. And then I realized, oh, I shouldn't have charged this because I didn't consider taxes. So you kind of learn that. So whatever your floor is going to be, add the tax, okay? And then also think about the time outside of the speaking event that's required for you to prepare for it, or outside of, submitting the writing, like how long is it really going to take? And consider all the time and the value of that time, because we work so hard to establish ourselves, and then we discredit ourselves when we allow people to pay us less than the true value, or at least in the ballpark of the value of our time, ultimately, because that's what they're paying us for, is our time.
I also believe strongly in a pain and suffering tax. So if it's a client that is going to be a little difficult to work with, maybe you've worked with before, maybe you just know how like certain corporations and institutions work, tack another 10 to 15% on there just for your pain and suffering and sanity. I do find that can also be very helpful in planning out your prices. Now, as we've talked about pulling together multiple streams of income, diversifying our income, for those who are planning to move away, or maybe currently already have moved away from a full-time job, don't have those employer benefits anymore, let's talk a little bit about how we manage things like health benefits and looking to plan for retirement. So Lisa, let's start off with health insurance. What are some of the ways that we can consider covering our own health insurance when we are planning to be freelancers?
Yeah, I definitely cannot speak to retirement. I think someone else would be better posed for that. But yeah, so when I left my corporate job, I had great health insurance. I also made a lot of money, and the choice to leave was really difficult. And I think anyone out here who is thinking about leaving your job probably stays up at night worrying, what happens if I get into a car accident? What happens if I break my leg? How am I going to do this? All valid, all fair, but you are not alone. There are things that you can do. I know when I left my job, I had the option to keep Cobra pay, which was something insane, like $800 a month. And that's not something that I was prepared to pay at that point, nor did I want to. So I didn't. And I went without health insurance for a while, which was ironic because I left my job because of chronic illness. But sometimes we have to make hard decisions in order to figure out what to do next. And that was just what I had to do at that point. So the time the next year rolled around when I could enroll in health insurance, I used the Freelancers Union. The rates that they were providing were just a little too steep for what I was getting back. And so I did end up using the New York State Marketplace, the New York State Health Marketplace. I will warn you that if you make over a certain amount, subsidies don't apply. So your cost will be fairly high. I'm not married, so I can't speak to that end of things. But as an individual, I was able to find health insurance that was fair and doable, although still high priced. So I would encourage you to find an accountant or other resources in the freelance world and other people who have done this before. Talk to them, look at what you can write off, look at where you can make savings, and really decide to get deliberate and intentional with it. Don't let yourself become overwhelmed, because at the end of the day, like, there are answers, there are things that you can do, there are ways that you can make things doable. But you do have to have people on your side and resources on your side. I can't give a better answer than that because it is a journey, and I would be lying to say that there's a perfect, easy, amazing solution. It is a bumpy road for freelancers, but with the right tools and people on your side, I think you can find something that works for you.
I do want to say I'm being a little cognizant of time, and we have done a whole webinar dedicated to retirement planning for creatives. So please check that out. It'll get into SEP IRAs, Roth IRAs, solo 401ks, all of the glorious things that we can have access to. And I'm just dropping some of those words in case you want to look them up after, but please check out that webinar. And I want to make sure to hop in here because we still have so many questions, and I'm going to start pulling some from the chat. We still have some great pre-submitted questions, but a big theme that we're seeing develop also in the chat is really going back to the basics, going all the way back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. How do you find work as a freelancer, an editor, a consultant, whatever it is that you want to be doing to diversify your income? How do you find that first gig? So Yaneli, let's start with you. How did you find that $50 gig?
Yeah. So for me, honestly, it started by just using word of mouth to just get the word out about the fact that I wanted to be paid to do whatever I want to do, right? So I had these YouTube videos up, but I knew that I wanted to do more in person. So I wanted to start speaking. And so I just started telling people that I knew and posting it on my Facebook page and emailing my email list, like, I'm for hire as a speaker. I talk about budgeting. I talk about paying for college. I talk about credit card debt. I talk about this, that. I can specialize in first gen experience. That's what I got. I can specialize in Latinx experience. I can and just give your pitch and put it out there, because what I realized is when you don't put it out there into the universe, you're essentially like, you are keeping it hidden. You don't want people to know that you want work. So how do you expect the gig to come to you, right? It's counterintuitive and it doesn't make sense. And so one of the things I stopped doing was saying aspiring blank. Cut that word out. Aspiring doesn't need that. You are a blank. Like, if you want to be a speaker, you're a speaker. You're not an aspiring speaker. If you want to be a writer, you're not an aspiring writer. You're a writer. And when you start saying it and telling everyone, they're going to reach out to you when they need a writer. Oh, I was just talking to a writer, not an aspiring writer, a writer. And I need a writer for this project. And they'll think of you if they've just seen your email about how you're doing this thing, or if they saw your Facebook post come on their feed, they're going to think about that. If they don't see it, guess what? They're just not going to think about it. So for me, word of mouth was huge. And to this day, actually, I was doing like a year overview, like end of November. So last week of November, I started looking at all my side gigs that I got this year. So aside from my 9 to 5, because I still do have one. And I looked at all of my side gigs. I was like, wow, 75% of these gigs came to me through word of mouth, even now, 6 years after I started my YouTube channel. The other 25% were either a random cold email that came to me asking for me to be a speaker, or not a random email, an email that came from my website where I actually put book me to speak, book me to write. And so add that to your website if it's not there already, and they can click the button and the email goes directly to your inbox. So those came in too. And then I also had, people in my network just refer, hey, I can't take this speaking gig, just don't have the capacity forwarding you this, so my network was super strong in that. I do follow a few blogs. I follow a few writers who are on Substack who have really great advice about how they've gotten gigs. And I've tried to kind of add some of that to my repertoire for 2022. So 2 things that I added, I signed up for a list of women speakers who are for hire, right? So then my page is kind of on there, so Innovation Women. And then I also recently just hired an agent who's going to help me now find more gigs. And that's 6 years after I've been doing it all word of mouth and all just through my network. So don't be afraid to say, put it out there, ask for the gigs, publicize that you're for hire, LinkedIn, right? Great, all the places. And then, when it gets to that point where you may need some help finding gigs, agents are great for that too.
And to clarify, your agent, do they specialize in speaking gigs, or is that more for brand partnerships or a collaboration of both? Both, which is awesome, because then I can kind of chill a little bit on trying to find the work myself and just see when his emails come through, what's the opportunity, do I want to do it or not? Tim, how about you? What are those early freelancing gigs, or even with the consulting?
Yeah, I mean, I basically am just going to echo Yaneli. So much work that I've gotten lately really just does come from my network and word of mouth. I've a relatively strong network with other folks who do the kind of suite of things that I do, which includes speaking, consulting, freelance writing, and freelance editing, and one-on-one coaching. And so we all have this kind of circle where if, we get a request for something that seems interesting but isn't really in our wheelhouse, we'll kind of pass it around. And so literally next week I have 2 speaking assignments that I got from other people forwarding to me who said hey, this looks cool, it's not my wheelhouse, but just sending it your way. And so I responded to the organizer and said hey, got this from this person, if you are still looking, this is well within my wheelhouse. So that, and there's also so many resources that I think we aren't all totally aware of that basically take all of the searching out of the equation. And you can just kind of go shopping and cherry pick assignments that sound interesting. One of those is called Opportunities of the Week, which is written by a woman named Sonia Wise. Her Twitter is twitter.com/Sonia Wise, and that's WEIS. And she just has this twice weekly newsletter that is just a laundry list of dozens and dozens of writing assignments. Everything from a one-off freelance assignment to somebody looking to take on someone on a temporary but long-term basis. The whole gamut. Another one that I love and that I actually partner with in my newsletter, Freelancing with Tim, is a newsletter called Journalism Jobs and a Photo of My Dog. It's run by a woman named Mandy Hoffmackel. And as it says, every Monday and Thursday, it comes out, and again, is just a laundry list of jobs and opportunities. Most of that is writing, but there's some speaking, some other project work, but they're just so useful. There's another one called Write Jobs Plus, with a plus sign, not P-L-U-S. Same deal. Those 3 are ones that I love, that I personally subscribe to, that I pay to subscribe to, because it's worth it. Because you could spend your entire working day just combing through Twitter callouts for pitches. But these people do that for you and then collate all of it, so you don't even have to think about it. There are so many resources that really take all of the work out of finding work. So really, what it comes down to is finding those resources. But the 3 that I mentioned are 3 that, again, I pay for and that I think are worth every penny. Also LinkedIn. LinkedIn is this secret weapon that nobody knows about, but I get so many speaking requests and consulting requests from LinkedIn, and people write off LinkedIn. It's oh, what is it, 2011 again? No, LinkedIn is amazing, and there's so much work to be found there, and nobody knows. And so it's just this gold mine of work that comes to you if you just kind of put yourself out there a little bit. Things happen. And then just also searching through listings and stuff like that. People write off LinkedIn, use that to your advantage, because that's a loss for those people, but it can be a gain for you.
I second LinkedIn, and also Twitter. I wouldn't totally write off Twitter for opportunities, not just in the sense of, just subscribe to the list that are aggregating the opportunities for you, but more, my very first freelance gigs came about because I was writing a blog entirely for free, just to write, and trying to, honestly, it started as a way to like showcase my ability to write, hoping it would lead to something else. And also just because I wanted to help people handle their money. And an editor at a now defunct personal finance place online wrote a really nice thing to me, like, oh, read this, really liked it. And I countered with like, oh, great, I'd love to write for you. Are you hiring? So anytime in the very beginning, anytime anyone complimented anything that I did, I would immediately ask if there was an opportunity, because, hey, they're already bought in on what I'm doing. So let me just see if there's a chance. And I never had anyone be like, ew, why would you ask me that? Like, it was always a very positive interaction. Lisa, where have you found yours? And also, somebody did specifically call back to the very first mention, Craigslist for writing jobs. Like, where on Craigslist were you finding reputable opportunities?
Okay, so first of all, I echo everything everyone here has said. To go back to the Craigslist thing, this was 2010, 2011. So Craigslist was very much my world at that point. It was very much where I found any sort of gig. I don't even remember the category I was looking in. I think it was gigs, and I typed in editorial and then saw what came up. I'm not sure how good that is nowadays. In fact, I think that it's a lot of scams at this point. So I would say that nowadays, I also subscribe to Sonia's newsletter. Their newsletter, I think, is run through Patreon. It's $3 a month or $3 a week or something like that. And it's, yeah, like Tim said, dozens and dozens and dozens of amazing opportunities. I've gotten a lot of writing gigs through that. Also, I follow a lot of editors on Twitter. I follow them on Facebook. I connect with them through Facebook groups like The Binders, which is, groups for women and non-binary people to share opportunities. I found a lot of gigs through there. There's often like freelancers looking for writers or editors looking for writer groups. Those are amazing. Never write that off. If you're off of Facebook because it's a terrible place, just join just to use those groups. I think it's 100% worth it for that. Same with Twitter. If you are averse to social media, which a lot of people I've spoken to are, they think like, how can I become a freelance writer if I hate social media? I'd say you don't have to be a social media pro, just get on it. Share writing from people that you like, share your own writing, engage as much as you can without losing your mind, and make an effort to connect with people, even if it means just following other writers and editors and what they do. Usually through that, I see a lot of editors say, hey, I'm taking pitches, here's my email. That is usually one way that I connect. I also love the LinkedIn idea. I think it's a gold mine. Everyone does joke, yes, it's like a 2011 site, but everyone's on there. And if I have been writing for X, Y, and Z health magazines, for example, which is something that I do, I write a lot about chronic illness and chronic diseases. So I'll just find all of the editors that edit for magazines that work in that area. And I'll just message them and say, here are 3 of my clips. I'd love to work with you. I love this piece that you recently wrote, or this piece that you recently edited, or this guide that you worked on. I'd love to learn more about what it's like to join your team as a freelancer. And boom, they usually answer. Have confidence, be audacious, back up what you're saying with a clip or 2. And if you don't have clips, I would say start off by writing your own blog or creating a website just where you can create your own writing. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people will say, but it's a blog, it's not real. It's like, well, you have to start somewhere. So that's definitely where I recommend you start. Do your very best to write as if you were writing for someone else who is publishing you, and go from there. But I would say, yeah, don't be afraid to reach out directly. I've even found Twitter to be a place where people talk about what they're looking for pitches wise from writers. And I'll just DM the editor and say, I'm sorry, I can email you if you'd like, if that's better. And usually they're totally cool. We exchange a few lines and then we move the relationship into email and I start writing for them. People aren't as mean, scary, or reluctant to hear from you as I think we think. I think there's this like big scary myth that everyone's like mean and they don't want to hear from you unless you're like special and famous. But people need writers. You can be that writer. Reach out to them, be polite, be professional. It will more often than not go your way.
Before we move on to the next question, the chat has exploded, wanting the resources again. So we're going to say it slower. And Yaneli, first, what was the name? Innovation Women. What was the name of the list of you? So say that again, and where do you find it?
Yeah, so if you just Google Innovation Women, there should be it's essentially like a bureau, and you can add yourself to the list as a speaker. So when people are looking for speakers who identify as women, they're going to go on here and look find speakers. They're going to look at featured speakers or women speakers for virtual events, and you will be on there in their directory. So when people are going there, they're more likely to see you as a speaker. There are tons of these directories. Innovation Women is just one small example. You can find a ton of these kinds of directories. Sometimes they have a fee to join. Sometimes they're free to add your name. And the more of them that you're on, the more likely it is that somebody will find you through them. But also I'll add, like, to Lisa's point, she's like, people are always looking for writers. And I think that we can replace the word writers with gigs. People are looking for people to do gigs for them. People are looking to hire, right? So what we're not looking for gigs. We're looking for people inherently, because the gigs are connected to the people who are looking to hire for those gigs. So if you're looking for people so that they can hire you for their gigs, then you need to be expanding your network. So when you're saying, I don't know how to find gigs, what you're saying is you don't know how to find people. And you know how to find people. You have to just expand your network, add more followers on LinkedIn, more connections on LinkedIn, reach out and say, hey, can we chat for 10 minutes? I want to learn more about your organization. And I've done that where I've seen a speaker that I really like, and like, I want to kind of be like that speaker. I've seen Erin Lowry speak at universities, and I'm like, I want to be like Erin, and I want to speak at universities. And so guess what? I reach out to universities. I'm like, hey, would love to talk to like the coordinator for events. And, I would just love to connect and see what kind of events the university has been hosting, and if I can be of any assistance. And then later I can say, hey, now that I know you, if you want to hire me, so it doesn't always have to be with that interest to start from the beginning, like, hey, I'm self-interested and I want you to hire me. It could just literally be, hey, I just want to network. I want you to be part of my network. I want to learn about what you do. It was so nice to meet you today. Great chatting with you for 10 minutes. Let's stay in touch. You didn't even mention money. You didn't even mention a gig. And then now they're part of your network. So later when they're planning a conference, they're like, that girl, she was so nice. Maybe she can speak at our conference. Boom. Because you know more people, there are more chances for you to get gigs.
And Tim, slowly the Substacks and the Twitter and the newsletters, especially Sonia's.
Yeah, so for Sonia, just find her on Twitter, because that's where she has all her information. And her Twitter is twitter.com/WEIS choice. Again, it's WEIS choice. She has links to her newsletter and a couple of other resources, but that's the best way to get in touch with her or to find her. The other one is, it's a Substack. It's the title is Journalism Jobs and a Photo of My Dog. I believe it's just journalismjobs.substack.com. I might be lying about that. That's what I think it is. If that's not it, literally just Google journalism jobs and a photo of my dog, and you'll have no trouble finding her. And the woman is called Mandy Hoffmackel. And the last one was Write Plus Now. That's on Patreon. I don't off the top of my head know their Patreon URL, but again, just Google Write Now Plus. I'm sorry, Write Now Plus. And it's a plus sign, not PLUS. And they're a Patreon.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we are low on time here. So I have one final question, and it ties into the fact that when most of us get started, we do some stuff for free, even as we're established. We do some stuff for free. But one of the questions that came up a few times was, when am I big enough to start charging? When am I big enough to stop doing work for free? So I'm curious for each of you, what is your advice, or what was your own personal metric of when it was like, you know what, I deserve to earn money for this, and this is valuable, and you need to value me? So Lisa, let's start with you.
Right after I had a few clips right out of college, I'd written either from a friend's blog or my own blog, or for like back in the day, there were websites where you could upload content, and it was sort of like Suite 101. Do you guys remember that? It was this website that you could just upload your work onto and you were published. No pay, of course. So once I had a few of those clips, I decided I'm just going to go for paid gigs at this point, because I have something in my pocket that I can show you to prove that I can write. There wasn't like all right, I've made it now I can charge moment. I think you're worthy of being paid. This is your talent. This is what you provide. It is a service. I think there's a lot of weird mentalities in the writing world that writing is naturally or inherently not as valuable as other works or services. And I use writing meaning all sorts of art and creative work and gigs like speaking. But it is valuable. There is inherent value. Everyone turns to it, and you should be charging from the get-go, really. Even if that's low and what you're being paid is lower than what maybe your peers are making at that point because your portfolio is smaller, start charging, start asking for what you believe is your worth. There is no point in time in which the switch flips. You're already valuable, and I really do say go for it. And most people are not going to argue. They might pay you less than what you asked for, but often they won't say no.
I love that. Nelly?
Yeah, I would just add, there's a step before you start charging, right? And there's also a step after not accepting anything and working free. So there's, we skip a step when we say, oh, I went from making nothing to charging. And the in-between step is asking, do you have a budget? Because the moment they say yes, guess what? That's when you start charging. That's when you start charging, because they said, yeah, we have a budget. We have $100. Okay, great. I'll take it. Now you're charging, and great. You can get money from. So don't be afraid. Like if they made it clear this is a free opportunity and you took it, awesome. If an opportunity comes your way and you're not sure, you ask, do you have a budget? And that's at first how you start to get comfortable. When they say, we don't have a budget for this gig, we're so sorry, but we're happy to help do X, Y, Z. You decide if you want to take it or not. But the moment you get, yes, we have this much budget, you are in the business of getting paid to do your gigs.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Nelly said, except, excuse me, instead of saying, do you have a budget? I say, what is the budget? Don't even make it a question about whether you're worth being paid. You are worth being paid because they asked you. So what is the budget? So I love that. The other thing is, I don't necessarily, I like to say, like, never ever do free work because you deserve to get paid. And so I don't think you should do anything for free. On the other hand, that is not a hard and fast rule. And I will say the first time that Erin and I ever met in person was on a panel with Ariana Huffington for her Thrive brand in like February 2020, right before the pandemic. We did not get paid, but like, it was a fun panel. And at that point, I think, Erin and I both were doing a ton of speaking gigs, probably getting like paid fairly well to do these kinds of things. But like, it was a fun panel that like had interesting panelists that was within our wheelhouse. But also, I forget, Nelly or Lisa had said this, but it was a type of event that had the potential to lead to more events. And so, again, that really, I didn't think of it this way back then, but if I were to evaluate that right now, I would look at it from the lens of pay, prestige, and passion. Like, we were talking about personal finance, which Erin and I both like write about. The prestige was there. We got to be on a panel with, I got to be on a panel with the Erin Lowry, okay? But was it paid? No, but it was still a fun event, and it was a great networking opportunity. And so, I don't think there's ever a point where you shouldn't do free work as long as it's interesting and you understand what the costs and benefits are.
100% agree. And yeah, the networking angle is really where I was doing my analysis on that particular panel. And I thank you all so much for your advice and your insights. This has been wonderfully informative. Thank you everybody for tuning in and for joining and asking such insightful questions as well.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Erin. Thank you to our panelists. This was our final webinar of the calendar year. It's been a blast. So I wish everyone a happy holidays. As we said, you can go to our website or just search YouTube for Authors Guild to find all kinds of content on here. And Lisa, you mentioned those $20 eHow articles. I got fired from that job for the slightest pushback on an editor, and I don't have a problem taking edits. So it was wild. But I bring that up because there was also some talk about the race to the bottom with per word rates and things like that, wanting to do right by our fellow writers by insisting on higher rates. And I think that's a good point, because the lower the pay, the tougher the job it often is. You get harsher criticism for a 7-cent a word blog post.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that we can connect on the eHow.
Yes, those were the days. Well, thanks to everyone. And as we said, we'll also send up a follow send a follow-up email to everyone who registered for the event, and we'll round up a lot of the links and resources that our wonderful panelists provided. So Tim, Yaneli, Lisa, Marie, and Aaron, thank you, and thanks to everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.